Do you have any specific challenges or questions that you're coming to the webinar with?
Well, nothing too major. I have celiac disease, but I'm pretty familiar with what's required for that. And I did start out pretty underweight, and then I was sick for the first 4 months, and so I haven't gained much weight.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested in general nutrition, maybe ideas for putting on a little more weight, and then good nutrition afterward for breastfeeding.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
We're going to talk about all of that. And I was sick for the first 4 months of my pregnancy. I was really, really sick, and I didn't eat a vegetable for 3 of those months, which is just crazy to think about. So I totally feel you.
Yeah, I don't know what my problem is. I normally love fresh vegetables and fruit, but every time I've eaten anything fresh, I've gotten sick other than a mandarin orange or a banana. So no fresh veggies in this pregnancy.
Yep. Are you still feeling that way?
I don't actually throw up, but yeah, if I try, like I can safely eat frozen broccoli, some mixed veggies, spinach, but pretty much anything else, I'm not sure why, but it tends to make me a little sick. So.
Yeah, it's weird. I found that there were certain things that I just couldn't handle. At some point I was able to eat most foods, but there were still some veggies that I just didn't want. Yeah. Shalene, when you were pregnant, did you have any of those? I can't remember. I'm sure we talked about it, but did you experience any sickness? Or
I didn't have any sickness with the first pregnancy. We were living in South Sudan for the first 3 months, first trimester, and we were trying to be minimalist about food that we carried into Sudan, and I didn't know I was pregnant when we went to Sudan, so all we had pretty much were beans and rice, and we took in lots of different spices to try to spice it differently, 2 meals a day, and we had oatmeal for breakfast most of the time, and protein bars, and I loved protein bars before I found out I was pregnant, and then I couldn't stomach them, and it was very difficult to just have such limited food, and I would imagine and dream about pasta because that's all I wanted, but I didn't have access to it. So my second trimester, when we got to Kenya, we took a break in Kenya for a little while. All I wanted was French fries and fried chicken and bread because I was craving things, and I felt like I was so hungry, and so my weight really fluctuated, and my mindset of food really fluctuated, and I tried to get it under control my third trimester, and it was very difficult. So with my second, I just remember, as I've talked with Katie about, having a major emergency hunger and had to eat immediately when I would feel that. So, welcome to those who have come to the webinar this evening, and we are glad to have Katie Haynes, a health coach, with us, and she was a past client and friend, and she knows from personal experience about nutrition during pregnancy and postpartum, as well as has professional experience with it and research for nutrition. And nutrition is always a very sensitive subject, especially during pregnancy, and we all have in our mind what we would like to have, what we think we know is appropriate to eat normally, or what we ideally would like to eat normally, and then during pregnancy that can all shift. So Katie can share some secrets that she had as a health coach and some realizations that she came across as she entered pregnancy herself with all the knowledge about healthy eating prior to pregnancy. So we welcome Katie, and she can tell some about herself, and then we will get started.
Okay, thanks, Shalene. I'm Katie Haynes, and I have a health coaching business called Simply Clean Meals. And as Shalene said, I had quite a few revelations when I was pregnant with my son. Being a health coach, I completely envisioned going into pregnancy as, just being ultimately healthy. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty healthy person to begin with, but I always imagined that when I got pregnant, I would just become this like super healthy eater and just, you know, really take it up a notch. And complete opposite happened. I was really sick for 4 months, and I didn't, like I was saying, I didn't eat a vegetable for those 4 months. I did eat potatoes, but they're not super nutrient rich. And I was so sick, luckily I couldn't really stress about it too much, because I just kind of laid in bed and then dragged myself out of bed to get to work. I didn't do any exercising. I didn't feel very well though, so I didn't stress, so that was good. Okay. Something that I learned here is that we can't stress about all of the foods that we should be eating or the things that we should be eating. What I learned from Shalene during the birthing process is that you just have to be in the present moment and go with the information that you have at the time. So accept what is, and you just do your best. So keep that in mind as we go through tonight. It's not about eating perfectly, and it's not about doing it perfectly. It's about doing the best with what you can in the situation. Okay.
Good for you.
That's right. And if anybody has a question, just jump in, just interrupt me. And Shalene, please, when you have things to add or any experience that you have, just jump right in.
Okay.
So what I want to remind everyone is that it's all about feeling good. So ultimately, we eat well and we exercise and we take care of our bodies so that we can feel good. And when we feel good, we're more likely to get up and go cook ourselves some food and take care of our bodies in other ways. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that you're eating to feel good and not to do it perfectly. So tonight we're going to talk about the top 3 to-dos in pregnancy. I'll discuss briefly if you're going to the hospital, if you're going to deliver at a birthing center, some things you might want to think about in terms of food, and then top 3 to-dos postpartum. So my first to-do when you're pregnant is to obviously eat real food. And when you're eating real whole foods, most of these targets that I will go into about calories and protein and carbs and other important nutrients, if you're eating real food, then you're going to be hitting those targets. But so what do I mean by eating real food? Well, that's eating the food that's pretty much on the perimeter of the grocery store. So it's the fruit, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, dairy. We'll go into more specifics later. Okay, so in terms of extra calories, I'm not a calorie counter, but I think it's important to have just kind of a picture in your head of how much more you would want to eat. In the second trimester, it's about 340 more calories. In the third, it's about 450 more calories. So if you're starting underweight, or if you're super active, then you're going to need more calories than that. And to put that in perspective, 340 calories is about a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. So it's not massive quantities of food. In terms of protein, you want to increase your protein by 25 grams. And again, that's just kind of a rough estimate. It's not like you need to hit 25 grams extra every day. Completely fine going over or not quite hitting that mark. And in terms of protein, getting it through hard-boiled eggs is a really great option because you can cook those up at the beginning of the week and eat them throughout the week. Eggs also have really important nutrients. The egg yolk has a lot of vitamin A, which is important in pregnancy and afterward when you're breastfeeding. Full-fat yogurt. So when you're doing dairy products, if you can, you want to choose organic, full-fat, and then grass-fed if it's possible. Same thing with any dairy product, cottage cheese, kefir. I've listed the dairy products on here that I call like bonus dairy. I don't really include cheese in a protein source because it's just cheese. And it doesn't mean it's bad, it's just doesn't have any bonus to it. But yogurt and cottage cheese and kefir all have beneficial bacteria for your gut. So they're really great to consume all the time if you can do dairy, but they're great in pregnancy as well. Nut butters, nuts and seeds, those are also really good for putting on weight if you're somebody that needs to increase your weight throughout pregnancy. Beans and lentil salads, chicken salad. So of course, when you're pregnant, it's recommended that you don't do uncooked, like processed meat or lunch meat. But I found a way to make it easy was to cook up a whole rotisserie chicken, like a whole chicken at the beginning of the week, and then kind of break it apart and use it in chicken salad and use it in soup. And then you can use the bones and make a bone broth with it really easily in your crock pot. So that's a little trick there. In terms of more protein, fish is good, but you just want to watch your mercury levels. So tuna has mercury often found in it, so you don't want to eat a ton of tuna when you're pregnant. I personally like to keep the recommendation a little bit lower for tuna, so once or twice a month, rather than, I think the recommendation is once a week. Salmon and sardine, I think, are better choices because you're getting kind of more of that omega-3s that you're not getting quite as much in the tuna, and you also don't have the mercury issue so much in salmon, and definitely not in sardines. So if you can stomach sardines, they're really fantastic to eat when you're pregnant because they have lots of vitamin D and they have lots of omega-3s, and they're very easy. They come canned and they're easy to eat. Select protein bars. I'll talk about protein bars in a little bit, but certain protein bars are good. And then also edamame. So soy is another thing that you might not want to consume a lot of when you're pregnant. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, you're going to have to consume a little bit more of it than somebody else because you need to get the protein. But a little bit of soy here and there is likely okay. And edamame is a good source, especially when it's organic. So it's non-GMO. And you just get the edamame in pods, frozen, and then you can boil it up. And it's a really easy, quick snack to take along. Okay, so that was protein. More carbohydrates. So you need more carbs when you're pregnant. And I include this in here because I think a lot of us don't think about needing more carbs when we're pregnant. We might have heard that we need more protein. I think most of us know that we need the omega-3s. That's pretty commonly shared info, but the carbohydrates we don't really think about. So this 150 to 175 grams feels somewhat arbitrary. The USDA recommends that just like a baseline non-pregnant person should have at least 130 grams of carbohydrates. And carbs are, we typically think of whole grains and breads, but carbs are also beans, vegetables, and fruits. Vegetables and fruits are carbohydrates. So remember that when you're factoring all of that in. If you're eating a real whole foods diet, it's not something that you need to focus on, but I just think it's important to understand that we need it. We need it for the baby's brain, supplies energy for fetal brain growth, and allows energy, the protein, to be used for growth and not for energy. So I think we hear a lot, eat more protein when you're pregnant. But if you're not eating the carbohydrates to balance that out, then that's going to be used for growth and not for energy. Okay, so some other nutrients, omega-3s, super important. Fat in general is really important to consume when you're pregnant and when you're not pregnant too. In the 80s and certainly in the 90s, that low-fat diet was all the rage, and it's not really a healthful diet, low-fat, because our bodies need fat to absorb nutrients. So fat in your diet is really important. You want to avoid the hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated oil because that's the trans fat. And you always need to look at the ingredients label on the box and look down in the ingredients. And if you see hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil, then you know that there's trans fat in that food, even if on the front it says no trans fat. So you always have to read the ingredients. But otherwise, in terms of fat, you want to choose the full fat dairy products. You want the coconut oil and coconut butter. If you're eating meat, then having a little bit of that meat fat is good. It's important. Avocados, nuts and seeds, that sort of thing. So that's fat. Omega-3s we need. Vitamin D, calcium, and B12 I'll talk about, and of course water. So the importance of omega-3s for the baby, it helps with brain development, promotes vision and hearing development, but they're just as important for mom. Omega-3s in general reduce inflammation. They can prolong a pregnancy if you're concerned about preterm, then prolonging the pregnancy might be something that is a concern. Omega-3s have been shown to help with that. And then also reducing postpartum depression. So omega-3s have been researched in terms of depression, both when you're not postpartum and postpartum. It's also been effective for bipolar. So omega-3s are really important for brain health, and it's especially important when you're pregnant and also when you're nursing. You can find it in specialty eggs. They feed the chickens chia seeds, and that's how the chickens have omega-3s in the eggs, but they'll be labeled omega-3 eggs. So you can get those. Salmon is nice and high in omega-3. Sardines, like I had said. Chia seeds, hemp seeds, or they're called hemp hearts, are great too. Flax seeds. For anyone that eats flax seeds, know that it has to be ground. I still come across people that buy just bags of flax seeds and eat those, but your body doesn't get anything out of them other than bulk. They pass right through you. So if you're looking to get nutrients out of flax seeds, make sure you're buying ground flax seeds or flax meal. But then also grass-fed whole fat dairy. So whenever the animal is grazing, it's picking up more nutrients than it would get if it was just being fed a grain diet. So you want to look for that grass-fed meat, pasture-raised chicken, all of that, and also whole fat, because the fat is where the good stuff is. Okay. Vitamin D is important. It's fat soluble though, so you could overdose on it. You want to get your levels tested and go from there. You probably have had your levels tested recently, but if you haven't, definitely get your vitamin D tested, and then you can look at supplementing. Calcium is an interesting thing. You absorb twice as much calcium when you're pregnant. So you don't actually need more calcium in your diet, which I always find so interesting. But it's important to make sure that you're getting enough in to prevent osteoporosis when, later down in life. But it's especially important when you are breastfeeding. I'll get to that on the other end. But just keep that in mind that is an important mineral to get. And then B12 is important for vegans and vegetarians, or anybody that has an issue with digestion or some sort of compromised digestion at times. You want to look at your B12. You want to make sure that your B12 has been tested. Not only does it help you feel more energized and alert, but it's a key nutrient, but it's really important in folate activity. So in order for your body to process and use folate correctly, it has to have enough B12, and folate helps prevent birth defects. So just make sure you get your B12 tested, and then you can go from there and supplement if you need to. So water, of course, is super important. 10 to 13 glasses a day is a rough estimate. You just need more water than you did previously when you're not pregnant. You want to add a glass of water for any cup of caffeine that you consume. Of course, you don't really want to consume much caffeine when you're pregnant. The amount is somewhat contested. Ideally, you would be getting enough rest and sleeping so that you don't need the caffeine, but we all know that's not always the case. But keeping your caffeine low is important when you're pregnant, as much as you can. But your water, getting enough water is going to help prevent UTIs, constipation, and hemorrhoids. So that's a big problem sometimes for pregnant women. So making sure you're getting enough water is a key component to kind of keeping that from either from happening or from getting worse. Water is the main way that nutrients are delivered to your baby. So of course you need to have enough. And then for yourself, getting enough water means more energy, less fatigue, less headaches, that sort of thing. So getting enough water is really key. So the first to do in pregnancy was eating real food. And there was a question about weight gain. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more. Some things that are kind of coming to mind. And Daphne, if you have any, if you want to jump in here, we can chat about this. But well, let me ask you, what sorts of things are you doing right now to increase your weight?
Can you still hear me okay? I took my headset off so my husband could listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been drinking 2 boosts, like Ensure, per day, because it's really hard for me, especially with the celiacs and not being able to get a lot of carbs from grain, to get enough carbs. So I drink 2 boosts a day. And I don't eat a lot of like grains anyway, so I eat like yogurt, cereal, a very lean meat, and then a couple different kinds of vegetables. And I've been trying to eat like guacamole or avocado when I can, but I really feel like I could use some extra suggestions. So
Yeah. Do you do fish at all?
maybe like once a week I'll have fish sticks or shrimp. Yeah.
Okay. If you like salmon, salmon would be a good fish to incorporate in because it's a nice fatty fish and it also has those omega-3s. It is a stronger flavored fish, but there are some really great recipes online if it's something that maybe you haven't liked in the past but would want to try again. Do you ever make your own smoothies?
I used to actually, but are you familiar with food combining?
Uh-huh.
I've heard that it's actually really bad food combining to do like fruit and dairy kind of smoothies, so I've been trying to avoid that.
Okay. Have you noticed a difference when you combine fruit and dairy?
I do, especially in terms of bowel movement.
Okay. So you can do smoothies without dairy. Do you do nuts?
Not a lot in pregnancy, but I do love them.
Okay. Because you could always do like an almond milk or hemp seed milk. Because typically nuts and fruit will combine. That's an okay combination. So doing an almond milk with I remember you saying vegetables were a challenge, but are fruits a challenge, do you feel like? Are there some fruits you can stomach?
Frozen seems to be okay. Fresh, I seem to get sick. So yeah, frozen fruit for smoothies would be good with maybe almond milk.
Yeah, so you would use almond milk. You could do some sort of frozen fruit, so either frozen strawberries or a frozen berry mix. You can add a half of an avocado or a full avocado to it. That'll make it really nice and creamy and milkshakey. If you can stomach banana, add a banana to it or a half of a banana. That will make it a little more sugary, although that could affect your digestion. So have you had problems with bananas in the past?
No.
Okay. Bananas don't, I don't know how to put this, they're not something that would make a person gain weight per se, but they are a fruit that's on that side of the spectrum. So adding some bananas in to a smoothie would be really good. And then I don't know if you've tried hemp seeds in the past, but hemp seeds are nice because they'll add protein. You could try a whey protein powder. You would just want to make sure in the ingredients to read it carefully, of course, to make sure that it's gluten-free, but then also that it's just the whey in there. But typically, whey protein is gentle on the stomach. In terms of the food combining aspect of that, you would just have to experiment. But you might want to try the hemp seeds. They're also called hemp hearts because those have nice fats in them too. And then, of course, when you're choosing dairy, so moving away from the smoothies now and just looking at dairy, try to do whole fat dairy. Any sort of peanut butter, nut butter, that kind of thing. Let's move on in our slides because I have some other examples and we can talk about how you can incorporate those kind of more fatty foods and more carbohydrate rich without grains. Okay, so bringing food everywhere you go is something I recommend really to everyone, even when you're not pregnant. So always have little snacks on hand so you don't have to rely on the vending machine. But bringing food everywhere when you're pregnant is especially important. So keeping snacks in your bag, in your car, in your desk at work is key. Trail mix, nut seeds. Lara bars are the food bars that I like because it's just simple ingredients. There are tons and tons of food bars out there, so just make sure you read the ingredients list. You want to be getting more real food and less food science. So if you see a bunch of ingredients on there, not sure what they are, then pass on it and find a bar that's more real food. So these Justin's nut butters, they come in little packets. It makes having nut butter really easy on hand. Artsana coconut butter. So coconut butter is a really fantastic fat to have, and it's delicious. And you can put coconut butter on, I think, starchy vegetables. So like sweet potatoes, cook a sweet potato in the oven and top it with either coconut oil or coconut butter and some cinnamon. That's delicious. In terms of putting on weight, if you think of those starchy vegetables, acorn squash, butternut squash, even potatoes, all of those things are going to be contribute more to weight gain. Baggies of crackers, like Mary's Gone crackers, I like those. Dried fruit is okay. You want to be sure with dried fruit that you're not eating too much of it, and also that when you're having the dried fruit, rather, just keep it in check, because when we eat dried fruit, we eat a lot more of it than we would if the fruit was whole. If you think of like an apricot, you might be able to eat 2 fresh whole apricots, but in dried apricots, you might have 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's just a ton of sugar that you're getting. So if you have dried fruit, that's great. Just keep it in check. And then oatmeal packets are really fantastic to have on hand as well for quick meals and energy. If you're dealing, like Shalene had said, with serious need to eat right now kind of hunger, I would suggest like getting a cooler and just packing it before you leave the house, not only with snacks, but with actual meals, maybe leftovers that can be eaten cold, or chicken salads, or like actual food. A small thermos of soup or chili if you're pregnant during the wintertime can be helpful. Stocking your freezer with food is also good. Store-bought is fine, or homemade, so that you know you always have something on hand ready to go. So Shalene, I see that there's a remaining meeting time.
I know, I was going to try to chat and say that without interrupting, but I didn't realize that I must have a limit on Zoom.
Okay.
Another webinar on this didn't have that come up, so unfortunately we don't have very much time left.
Okay, so let me just fly by some of this then.
Yeah.
Exercising is important. I'm going to move past this because we all probably understand that it's important. So I'll keep going. At the hospital or birthing center, put some thought into what food you want to bring. Healthy snacks for you and for your birth partner is important. Meals, especially if the cafeteria is closed after your baby arrives. I had this fear that I was going to deliver in the middle of the night and then wouldn't have food until the cafeteria open in the morning, and that happened. I delivered at 10:45, but I had big ziti and I had soup and I had all sorts of things that I could heat up in the microwave, and it really, really helped. And something else that Shalene did right after I delivered, it felt like right after, very shortly after, she suggested that I eat something. And I had made myself these power balls, I call them. There's a recipe on my website. And that really helped. I felt really great the next day. And I think that some of that was, eating directly after, because you think when you have a big, like when you're running a marathon or when you're having some big exercise event, you eat afterwards to refuel your body. And so I think that must have been part of it. I don't know, Shalene, if you do that with all of your clients, recommend eating afterward?
I do, and definitely some kind of energy drink or even a soda. If you don't drink any sodas ever any other time, that would be the time to drink a soda or juice or something with sugar to boost the energy.
And I think people don't really think about that. But I felt fantastic in the days directly after delivering. And I think it in part was because of eating right after and having the food to eat a few hours later. And I know that you provide, or you brought honey sticks, and that was also, I think I remember having those, but just kind of that quick sugar is important to have. So planning for the first weeks after baby arrives is really key. So getting your freezer stocked with meals already cooked or crock pot meals. You can go online and find recipes for crock pot meals that you put in the freezer. Those are great. Have people bring freezer meals and or snacks to a baby shower. So having them, if they maybe don't feel comfortable bringing a big meal, or maybe you have a small freezer, asking them to bring like their favorite healthy snacks would be good too, because it's great to have snacks on hand when you're first home and breastfeeding and not wanting to get up and move around a lot. It's great to have those on hand. And if you can plan ahead to cook a couple extra snacks to put in the freezer, like healthy muffins, I have some recipes on my website. Lactation cookies are great for if you're going back to work and having to pump. Sometimes you can eat specific things, galactologs, so that your milk production increases for some people. But you can make a batch of those and put those in the freezer. Breakfast cookies, you can have food bars on hand. You can make bone broth. Bone broth might actually be really great, Daphne, for you to look into. You can find bone broth recipes online. It's really easy. It's just making stock, basically. And you can make it in the crock pot and then freeze it. And it's a fantastic, really healing for the gut and healthful drink to have on hand, or just make soups out of it or add it to your meals. It's really great. Organize or have somebody organize meal deliveries via Take Them a Meal. It's a great service, free online. And then also have accessible 5 of your favorite easy, I call them recipes, not necessarily recipes, but things that can be made quickly so that you don't have to think about it, or your partner or husband doesn't have to think about it. So one of those meals for me is frozen salmon and frozen broccoli. So frozen salmon can be defrosted in 15 minutes. You put that in the oven. Frozen broccoli you can take right from the freezer, put it on a pan, put that in the oven and roast it. That's an easy, quick meal that takes really no time to think about. But try to have 5 of those kind of accessible meals just kind of written down so you don't have to think about it, or somebody else can make it for you. So that was planning for after the baby arrives. Know your nutritional nursing needs. So initially, your diet postpartum will be similar to your diet in pregnancy. Pretty much everything stays the same, so keep eating well. In the first 6 months, breastfeeding requires an additional 500 calories, so you're going to eat about 300 extra, and then the rest is going to be pulled from your fat stores, and that's how you can lose weight while you are breastfeeding. But you definitely don't want to diet or do any sort of calorie restriction while you're breastfeeding, especially in those first 6 months. You're going to drink a lot of water. You'll probably be really, really thirsty. I know I was. And so drinking water when I was nursing was not an issue at all. But just having it accessible everywhere is really helpful and important. So your nutritional needs in nursing really stays the same as when you were pregnant. And then finally, create time for self-care. So this is key in terms of just making sure that your body as a whole is feeling good. And like I said at the very beginning, when you feel good, you're more likely to do a little bit more for your health, cook the food, or just make better choices. So taking baths, watching funny movies, good books or trashy magazines. For me, getting out of the house was really important. So that was, I flew through the end there.
Yeah, sorry we don't have time for a question and answer, but I'm going to be posting this video. I do want, we have the websites there. Katie does do consultations, so if anybody wants to contact her for specific needs, she is available for that. So thank you, Katie, for taking your time this evening, and I will be posting this video for others to access. So we appreciate your knowledge and wisdom.